offensive line really is part of where this league is transitioning to. If you don't have a good offensive line, you don't have a good defensive line, don't even think that you're going to win a championship. And there's a player right now in the draft that's falling, and I'm surprised. Tyler Lindenbaum. I mean, if you look at every draft board, this kid keeps falling to the 20s, and I think he could be a top 10 pick. I think he's the best center in this year's draft. He reminds me of a Nick Mangold, a little bit faster. It has a little bit more edgy. He's more edgy type of player. He's mean. What are your thoughts right now when you look at Tyler Lindenbaum? Why is he falling in a lot of people's draft boards?
I think he's one of the most fun players in this class to watch. You pop on Iowa, it's hard not to notice how good Tyler Linderbaum is at moving guys off the line. And I mean, he gets nasty. Basically, there's two reasons he's falling. One is position. Center, historically, I don't think we've had a top 10 pick at center since the merger. So teams generally have not considered the center position to be quite as important. I think part of that is the analytics of it. Center is the one position where athleticism does not correlate to NFL success. So basically, like, it's the one position where, to me, I would think center is where you want an athletic guy, but doesn't necessarily have that much of an impact. The other thing with Linderbaum, outside of just position, is he's under 300 pounds. And I think that's a tough sell up above. Nick Mangold, you mentioned, I think he was in the high 300s, 307, 308. So I think it's a hard sell for teams to say, we're going to take this guy in the top 15. He weighs, 292. How's he going to go up against these 330, 340 pounders? I think Tyler Linderbaum can do it. If it was me, I have him top 15 on my board. I wouldn't hesitate to take him there. He can even play guard if you're really scared about the center thing. Also, the center class is absolute garbage outside of him. I mean, I don't know if there's another center that you pick before the fourth or fifth round. No. So if you want one, you better take Tyler Linderbaum, or you're taking a guard that's never snapped the football and hoping he can. So I think that should play into it. And I think he could pop back up there before all said and done.
You mentioned Ekwonu before as somebody that you have in your top 4 of what you think could end up happening. So what do you like about him in terms of that rise that we've seen? Because I've mostly seen him in like the mid-first round previously, maybe borderline top 10, and now is all of a sudden rising. What do you see in him that makes him up there?
I think he was a guy when he came into the season, people didn't really have him on the radar. NC State is not a super high profile school. But Ekwonu from almost game one was just a dominant left tackle. And he was a player, when you watch NC State, I mean, he is pancaking guys almost every single play. He loves to get out and kind of lead block. So in terms of run blocking, phenomenal, best in the class easily. And then you saw him develop over the season in terms of his footwork and kick slide and be able to handle some of these ACC pass rushers that have some of that elite athletic ability. So now you have a guy that can just essentially kick ass at run blocking, and he's showing off the footwork to stick with some of these more athletic, smaller edge rushers. And that's exactly what you want in the NFL. If you have that player, you can just seal off that side of the line, run behind that side of the line, and feel confident. I think that's what people like. He's one of those players that has great size, has good movement ability. I'm hoping we see that at the workouts at the combine and see that kind of play out. But he's kind of a little bit late riser. People didn't have him doing too much coming into the season. He played guard for a little while at NC State. I just think he's phenomenal and can be that complete package, perhaps.
We are talking to Draft Countdown managing partner and analyst Shane Hallam. The New York Giants drafting at 5 and 7. They're positioned very, very well. This is a very important draft. You have a new GM. You have a new coach. They have to solidify this team. They have to really put a stamp in this year's draft to say, this is where we're going. This is where we're going to move forward as an organization. Where do you see the Giants at 5 and 7 going at those positions?
I think it's kind of down to 3 positions for me. I think offensive tackle, we just talked how important that is. If one of those, Evan Neal, Ike Ekwonu falls, I think that's a run to the podium and hand in the pick. If not, I really like Charles Cross, the offensive tackle from Mississippi State, playing in a Mike Leach offense. He had a pass block all the time and is super, super great feet, really athletic. I think maybe he's a player that could fall down to that second pick of theirs and be an interesting choice. Edge rusher, they need to add pass rush. I think the defense is pretty solid, but I really like this next tier. Once again, it's Kayvon Thibodeau fall. I would think you should consider him if he does, and maybe clear that up. I think George Karlaftis from Purdue is a player who seems to be falling a little bit in people's eyes, but I think his workouts, the combine will bring him back up into the top 10. Maybe even David Ajabo from Michigan on the other side of Aiden Hutchinson could be intriguing picks. And then I say the secondary, when you're picking a 5, maybe the 5th best player in this class, maybe the number 1 overall player in this class is Kyle Hamilton, the safety out of Notre Dame.
Wow.
He's a player that I compare as a prospect to Sean Taylor. He's that type of size at 6'4", 220 pounds, allegedly going to run like a 4.4 something 40.
The Jets love him.
Yeah, and you can see that on film. He runs across the field and makes interceptions out of nowhere. Like you want a game-changing player. I think he could be that. And then Sauce Gardner, the corner out of Cincinnati, is a player who didn't allow a touchdown his entire career. 6'2", 188. He's someone who's going to run really well. He pretty much shut down Jameson Williams in the playoff game. I think he's maybe a consideration after some of the issues with rookie corners that the Giants have had.
Jeff, you heard that? He mentioned Sauce, okay? So stop throwing Mr. Hallam under the bus. He loves you. He absolutely loves you. All the different draft combine guys that we've had, he loves your reports, everything. So he follows you, Shane. So he absolutely loves you.
I'll take it. I'll take that. I don't want to get on Jeff's bad side after that call.
I'm a Giants fan. So you also mentioned with Sauce Gardner, James Bradbury looking to trade too. So that could be another leverage point for that kind of thing. So you brought up Hamilton, and also on the offensive side too, we're seeing a lot of these hybrid players really take shape as being not only dominant forces, but being more prominent throughout the league. So can you see this kind of thing taking shape as being more of a norm and maybe taking on the majority rather than just the pure wide receiver or the pure corner type thing? Like Kyle Hamilton can play all over the place, and you saw him do that this year when after Owusu went to the Browns in last year's draft. So can you see that kind of thing taking a norm where they prioritize that even more in the first round rather than just being the quote unquote like gadget players or hybrid players?
I think it's coming to that as the college landscape kind of adapts. I think we're going to see those kind of players on both sides of the football have a little more impact. Take a guy, in terms of like safety to linebacker type, Daxton Hill from Michigan is a player that, super athletic, lined up a lot in the nickel, played nickel corner, but he's a safety and he can play deep and he can play, you're going to use him in so many different ways depending on what the offense does. I think that's big. And I think on the offensive side, you're right too. And we saw Kadarius Toney with the Giants get drafted last year and more of that hybrid role. An interesting guy, not a first rounder, but maybe second day, is Wan'Dale Robinson out of Kentucky, who, played running back at Nebraska, transferred to Kentucky, played receiver, 5'8", but he played outside. I mean, he was he played like he was a 6-foot guy. So I think you could use him in a running back role and handing the ball off, and he's fat. You could do a lot of different things with him. I think teams want that kind of player, even if maybe, us fantasy guys aren't going to love that they don't get a ton of yards or a ton of touchdowns. But when you have that type of electric player, it makes defenses, know what's happening. And on the other side of the ball, same thing. Like I said, with Daxton Hill or with some of these big safeties like Sterling Weatherford out of Miami, could play a little linebacker, Nick Cross from Maryland. I think there's a lot that you have to account for and know where those players are, and that helps you win games.
My last question, you look at the Cowboys, and they made a very good first-round pick last year. They bring in the Defensive Rookie of the Year. He was fabulous. Everybody that thought Michael Parsons, in the background of him, from Pennsylvania, the gang-related background, the people that he hangs out with, it wasn't going to work in New York. It wasn't going to work, but it worked with the Cowboys, okay? The Cowboys who like to bring in players that just aren't very nice. But Michael Parsons had a great year. Is there somebody or something or some player that stands out in this year's draft that could really put the Cowboys over the top this year? They are going to lose pieces in free agency because they don't have the money. So they're going to have to build around the draft. They hit it on Michael Parsons. Is there a player in this year's draft on where they're positioned to draft where they can just nail it and get another Michael Parsons?
I think those players exist. I don't think you're going to get someone where they're drafting at the high profile of Micah Parsons. But to me, I feel like you're looking at strengthening those lines if you're Dallas, right? I think it's going to be offensive or defensive line. I think one intriguing player on the defensive side, maybe to give you a little bit of interior pass rush, free up a guy like Micah Parsons to play a little more of that variety role, and let your pass rushers kind of pin their nose back, is Travis Jones from UConn. Someone's kind of gaining steam. 326 pounds, has that nose tackle body, but can kick outside to be an edge rusher if you need him to. He's a 3-down player, has really good pass rush ability. Senior Bowl, absolutely dominant. And, you're like UConn. Like, who wants to play from UConn? One of the worst teams in FBS this year. You watch UConn's defense. I don't know if there's any player on that defense outside of Travis Jones that would even play in the USFL. So he was getting double teamed, triple teamed, and still making plays. I think that's the type of player that Cowboys need. Just someone that you have to account for. We have to account for Micah Parsons. You start getting to the passer. We saw how that worked last year, turned into big plays for the defense. I think that's a real possibility. That'd be the guy that I'd peg. But I think Dallas is tough this year to predict because Jerry Jones can go a number of different ways, and there's going to be a couple holes there, like you said. But I think Travis Jones would be a great fit.
Mm-hmm. All right, so 2-part question with your Steelers. So number one, there's a rumor that's come out that they're looking at Louis Riddick to be their next GM. So what would you think of that? And number two, I know you mentioned the last time we had you on the show that you would want a veteran quarterback to transition, not take a quarterback this year if you're the Steelers. So what direction would you want to see the Steelers go in, or a particular prospect? I've heard O-line, I've heard secondary for corners. I know you mentioned on the last show you're not a huge Derek Stingley fan. You thought he was a bit overrated. But if he falls to the Steelers, I don't know if you could be mad at that kind of thing. So what direction would you go in if you were the Steelers?
I think Louis Riddick would be super interesting. The Steelers are definitely doing their due diligence, so whoever they hire, I'll probably be fairly confident in. I'm still hoping for an internal hire. I think Omar Khan, the kind of the business side, he has done wonders with it. If they could pair him with someone that knows scouting and knows, I think it's a way to go, like the Vikings are right now. I'll take Derek Stingley at 20. If you want to give it to me, I'll still take him. I didn't think he was a top 5 player. He's kind of fallen behind Sauce Gardner. I think it's kind of come to fruition now. If it was me, I would want interior offensive lineman. We talked about Tyler Linderbaum. If he's somehow there, I'd run that card up. I don't know if they would, but I definitely would. I really like the guard Kenyon Green from Texas A&M. I think he's someone they've already interviewed. He mentioned at the combine, 325 pounds, 6'4", was a big part of the reason they beat Alabama. He was, making holes. I think Najee Harris behind him, that right guard is a place that they need to fill up. The quarterback position, if Malik Willis from Liberty falls to 20, then I think the Steelers will take him. And I'd be fine with that. I think he has some development to go. Maybe you still start Mason Rudolph and you can sit Malik Willis down. Maybe this is being a bad fan, but I almost would rather just go with Mason Rudolph. It's not going to be good. And the Steelers probably aren't going to be good this year, no matter who the quarterback is. They're not probably trading for Aaron Rodgers or anything like that. So I think I'm fine going with Mason Rudolph, or sign a Mitch Trubisky to a year or two deal and just see if you can build the offensive line back, get the defense back to where it needs to be, and then look next year at the 2023 class, a much better quarterback class, and then I think you draft your.
You're not the only Steelers fan who said that either. I've heard a lot of times they just want to keep Mason Rudolph. And I also give you credit, too. You mentioned Stingley falling. Ever since we had you on the show last time, I've seen him more in the 10 through 15 range at mock draft rather than the top 5 like they were originally.
Yeah, it seems to be happening as time goes on. We'll see. I don't know what he's going to do at the combine, but we'll see if he can rehab that a bit.
I think it's a big mistake. That's all I'm going to say. I think he's a great player. So, Jeff actually is on the feed, and he wants to know, get his linebacking ranking. It'll be interesting to see where he has them ranking. So, who is your top linebacking ranking of this year's draft?
So right now I have 2 guys with first round grades. Number 1, I have Devin Lloyd from Utah. Was that defense, a big pick 6 in the bowl game. I think he's rock solid tackler and can cover. Number 2 is Nakobe Dean from Georgia. You put on Georgia's defense, it's great, but Nakobe Dean was really able to hit that second level and rush the passer a little bit. As long as he's not like super slow or super unathletic, which I don't think he is, then I think Dean's going to be, I think he'll be a first round pick. After that, I think it gets a little bit tenuous in the second day. Christian Harris from Alabama had kind of a rough year. I'm interested to see his athleticism. Then I really like Darian Beavers from Cincinnati and Chad Muma from Wyoming, who we mentioned before, as kind of day 2, second, third round picks.